from her entrails fly, and flakes of mounting flames that lick the sky. Virgil, 1st century BC. Planet Earth, 74,000 years ago. This is the Pleistocene era. Although it may not look it, this is the Ice Age.
The Ice Age is a misnomer. In reality, it was ice coming, ice going, 15,000 years building up, a few thousand years losing it back and forth. So the world's climate goes from really mad ice everywhere to these inter-ice periods.
This is one such inter-ice period. Thick jungles stretch all the way into North America and Asia. Even the Sahara Desert is lush and green. In this vibrant world, the most remarkable species yet flourishes: man. The first Homo sapiens, or knowing man, appeared in Africa some 200,000 years ago. Despite obvious differences in culture and social structure, they look very similar to humans today.
Well, let's go back to 74,000 years ago. We bump into our deep, deep ancestors here. We don't share language, of course, but we certainly share features. From a facial point of view, from a body point of view, there's going to be no telling the difference between us.
Their primitive tool-making skills and native intelligence have allowed them to succeed where other forms have failed. From their meager beginnings in Africa over 130,000 years ago, our Stone Age counterparts have spread around the globe. Though they couldn't possibly know it, in 7 days, mankind will become an endangered species. In what is now the Indonesian island of Sumatra, a terrible volcanic apocalypse gathers beneath the Earth's crust. 74,000 years ago, Sumatra is a place of pristine beaches and lush jungle landscapes. But beneath this serene island, a killer lurks: the Toba supervolcano.
Supervolcanoes don't look like the classic volcano that most people imagine. A beautiful cone-shaped volcano like Mount Fuji or one of the Cascade volcanoes. Instead, it's an enormous depression.
The landscape of the 60-mile-wide supervolcano is what's known as a caldera, a crater left by a previous volcanic eruption 200,000 years ago. The rains have partially filled the crater, resulting in a small lake. The lava chamber looming below formed as the Indo-Australian plate steadily ground against the Philippine plate over the course of thousands of years. The intense heat and pressure is enough to melt rock.
So this is your old case of an irresistible force running into an immovable object. And the immovable object is very sticky silicate rocks with heat coming up from underneath. And it holds, it holds, it holds, it holds, it holds. And when it does break, it isn't like a little piece going out of a dam. It's the whole dam shattering and blowing outward and blowing up.
It may have taken thousands of years to form, but it will erupt in an instant. And when it does, the entire world will feel its wrath. It's just 3 days before the eruption, but life goes on as usual. Sumatra and much of the rest of southern Asia is home to a variety of animal life. much like our own animal kingdom, through a bizarre looking glass.
Things that were alive back then were much larger. The cats were larger, the dogs were larger, there were larger apes around. There's actually a whole fauna of large-bodied animals that we've lost since that time period.
At the top of the supervolcano itself, Elasmotherium graze on tall grasses. They are the ancestors of today's rhinoceros, but are similar to horses in skeletal structure. They stand nearly 7 feet tall, but the horn adds another 6 feet. Some historians believe that Elasmotherium is the source of the unicorn myth.
Evolution makes things get bigger. It's called Cope's rule, and there's a simple reason for that. The bigger you are, the less chance you have to get eaten up by the predators.
Elasmotherium's most feared predator is the Sumatran leopard. These cats are the apex predator on the island. Sleek and powerful, they're the size of a modern lion with the speed and agility of a cheetah.
The big cats were big because their prey was big. And you have this back and forth. It's an arms race. As your prey gets bigger, you need bigger teeth, bigger claws, a bigger jump. You've got to have the equipment to bring it down.
These are the creatures that will experience firsthand the terrible power of the Toba supervolcano. 74,000 years ago, the human race was nearly driven to extinction by the eruption of the Toba supervolcano. The explosion begins deep underground. The ground above the supervolcano begins to implode. The roof literally caves in from the crushing weight of the Earth's crust, hammering the massive chamber of liquid rock below like a giant piston. Magma explodes towards the surface, vaporizing huge amounts of groundwater. All over the jungle, towering geysers burst open almost in unison. Then the hiss of steam finally gives way to the thunderous crack of rock splitting open. The eruption is 3,000 times greater than Mount St. Helens.
Toba is the biggest volcanic eruption that science has been able to identify. It could have been the biggest volcanic eruption of millions of years, maybe of all time. We do know that it dwarfs anything that's happened in the last 100,000 years.
Thousands of animals are consumed. Just a flash of light, heat, then nothingness. Still the explosion rages, hurling molten rock, ash, and noxious fumes into the air.
You see these plumes of smoke come out, and the gases and ash particles are being spread around close to the volcano, and then maybe all of a sudden it was just too much and then it blew catastrophically.
As the magma chamber collapses inward, the edges of the volcano were stretched and cracked. These are the weak spots from which the magma explodes. Those animals killed instantly are the lucky ones. A rolling cloud swallowing up the landscape. These clouds of debris, called pyroclastic flows, completely destroy anything in their path. They steamroll the jungle, mixing with scorched earth, water and debris.
It's so hot it turns into a pseudo-liquid and flows forward, rushing over and burning everything in its pathway. It's just this flow of hot ash coming at you, like Pompeii back in ancient Roman times, and it just burned everything in its path.
Reaching temperatures of 1500 degrees Fahrenheit. These white-hot flows travel over 60 miles per hour, over twice as fast as a human can run. It's faster than Elasmotherium and even the Sumatran leopards.
Being overrun by a pyroclastic flow would be a really chaotic, devastating experience of which life would be over almost instantaneously. It'd be turbulent and it would be excessively hot.
Any humans caught in a pyroclastic flow suffer a cruel and torturous death.
When we look at the remains of humans that have been overrun by pyroclastic flows, we find that body fluids boil, skull sutures burst because of brains volatilizing. This would be a really sudden, catastrophic event to the body, and death would be quick, agonizing, but quick.
The pyroclastic flows engulf much of the island, traveling over 100 miles from the epicenter in all directions. It will be hours before they settle over the ocean and cool. But the eruption doesn't kill everything on Sumatra. At the island's southern tip, there are living witnesses to the awesome power of Toba. A small hunting party of humans can't help but watch in horror. From this distance, some 200 miles away, they're safe from the heat. The sickening smoke column appears to move in slow motion.
Had you been able to witness Toba, it would have been a show unparalleled. Scientifically, we can't even predict how much light, how much energy is released, in the sense that what would the phenomenon look like from a distance. It would have been amazing. Something like being fairly close to a nuclear explosion.
For several minutes, the ash gathers in silence. Then, the thunderous shockwave catches up. For these humans, the sound is literally deafening.
Assuming that they would have survived, it would have probably blown out their eardrums.
The hunters writhe in agony. Toba has announced its lethal dominion over the island of Sumatra. The thunderous explosions continue for 2 hours before they relent. But lava continues gushing from Toba's fathomless belly. This place was once a peaceful habitat for Elasmotherium and Sumatran leopards. Now Toba is a gaping pit, hidden from sight by an enormous ash column. 200 cubic miles of ash pulses into the stratosphere, reaching a height of over 5 miles.
Again, we think of Mount St. Helens as a yardstick. A great deal of dust went up, enough to coat much of Washington State to the east with inches of ash. But the equivalent, if we had had that particular volcano taking place in Washington State, it would have been tens of feet of ash over the entire state.
The ash alone could fill the entire Grand Canyon to the top. As destructive as the eruption was, it is only the beginning. Toba's ash cloud is the volcano's secret weapon. Slowly, this debris will spread out across the world. Soon, every creature on the planet will suffer the lethal power of Toba. The skies, they were ashen and sober. The leaves, they were crisped and sere. Edgar Allan Poe, 1847. "24 hours have passed since the Toba supervolcano erupted. Sumatra is burned and scarred by the disaster. The few humans alive on the island take shelter in caves, dazed, struck deaf by the volcano's explosion and what has happened to their world. And yet a new wave of destruction is already in motion. Vast amounts of ash pour into the atmosphere.
Animals that were around in India and Southeast Asia would have had a very hard time breathing because of all the ash and all the thick particulates in the air.
Toba's ash column towers over the island, 120 miles in diameter and 30 miles high. Ash from Mount St. Helens reached just 12 miles into the atmosphere.
From space, the Toba eruption would have appeared as a growing ellipse of dark ash spreading mostly towards the northwest, but also to the east as well.
It can be seen from Java, 400 miles away. From Burma, 800 miles away. From Malaysia, more than 1,000 miles away. Scientists believe Toba erupted in the summertime, at the height of the monsoon season. Storm systems brewing over the Indian Ocean now gather huge amounts of ash and carry them to the northeast, deeper into Asia.
If you throw dust up into the air in the latitudes of Sumatra, it is going to be transported. So it goes up, this big plume after the eruption goes up fairly high into the stratosphere. But the volume of dust is what is just almost incomprehensible.
2 days after the eruption, a steady rain of ash coats a once lush landscape in what is now Vietnam. This is home to one of the largest apes to ever walk the face of the earth, Gigantopithecus. Nearly 10 feet tall and weighing an astonishing 1,200 pounds, this great ape would tower over the largest living gorilla and weigh nearly 3 times as much. Gigantopithecus is known from fossilized jaws and teeth, which strongly resemble that of orangutans in our time.
Based on living orangutans as a model, we can imagine that Gigantopithecus was a fairly solitary creature, not living in very, very complicated social groups, which is kind of in contrast to the chimpanzee and gorilla model of great apes.
Just days ago, all was well. Gigantopithecus roamed the grassy lowland plains of Vietnam, searching for food.
This isn't something that's going to go out and strangle animals and eat them. It's a very gentle giant in all probability. Not very smart. You don't have to be very smart to sit in the same place and just pluck, like gorillas, fruit off of the tree.
But Gigantopithecus's delicate world has been destroyed. His diet of bamboo and fruits is gone. He's starving. But much worse, his only predator in this place is starving too, the puma.
I think there's no question but that Gigantopithecus, at least at times, was preyed upon by very large cats. Well, like all other great apes, the males had very large canines that definitely would have been useful weapons to ward off and perhaps dissuade predation by other animals.
The young must be defended at all costs. The strongest male stays behind, attempting to scare off the predators. But the pumas, driven by desperation, decide to fight. Luckily, Gigantopithecus still has enough strength to defend himself and his family. But no animal, no matter how large, can defend itself against Toba. Ash from the volcano is enough to fell this great ape.
You can basically suffocate from volcanic ash. There's a site in Nebraska that dates back to the Miocene where a large number of early horses, early rhinos, things like this, are well preserved in a volcanic ashfall that's quite similar.
As the ash is inhaled, it mixes with the moisture in the lungs and becomes a suffocating slurry. Large animals like Gigantopithecus are particularly vulnerable to this grim fate. It has been 4 days since Toba exploded. Amazingly, lava continues pouring from cracks in the earth. A tremendous amount of debris has been hurled into the air. Ash is spread throughout the world. Even today, a thin layer can be found locked in sediments of this time period. Scientists have drilled ice cores in the Arctic that contain Toba ash, a testament to the destructive power of this single volcano.
You can actually be looking at stratigraphic layers and find an ash layer that can be very thick at times. I mean, in places it's up to 1.5 meters thick.
The southern hemisphere is cloaked in permanent nightfall. The sun is blocked from the sky. Even worse, the ever-present ash is strangling plant life.
All the plants sitting there in these tropical rainforests are now have a gray coating. Photosynthesis gets turned off. They die.
Ever resourceful, humankind finds ways to stay well-fed. One advantage is critical, an ability to digest meat as well as plant material. When one is in short supply, the scattered communities of Homo sapiens can subsist on the other.
Homo sapiens going through this particular bottleneck would have had a couple of choices. We have to change diet or move. In the plains of Africa, where Homo sapiens was living and existing, climate change probably required, let's get out of town. Let's move out of here because we're starving.
But in this catastrophe, there is nowhere to run. Toba is laying siege to the whole world. Its grip tightens with each passing day. It may yet put the animals of Earth on the path to complete extinction. Gigantopithecus was the largest ape to ever walk the Earth, weighing as much as 1,200 pounds. But scientists think that this huge creature survived on plants and fruit alone.
One of the neatest things about Gigantopithecus is that we've been able to isolate actual plant phytoliths that adhere to the teeth of Gigantopithecus. And so we have direct evidence of what this organism was eating. And it was apparently a fairly eclectic creature. It ate fruits, it ate grasses of different kinds.
As more advanced testing methods develop, we will be able to unlock more secrets of the past. Can one volcanic eruption change the course of life on Earth? 74,000 years ago, the Toba supervolcano did just that. Incredibly, the eruption has raged unabated for 7 days. From the decimated island of Sumatra, Toba's deadly reach now extends thousands of miles to the northwest.
A single volcanic eruption, if it is large enough, can have a tremendous effect on life around the world. That material can get to the stratosphere, which is above our weather. And without our weather, without precipitation, it can stay there for years.
Almost 2,000 miles away in India, the steady accumulation of ash has taken a toll on the stegodon population. Though stegodons resemble elephants, they are much bigger. They stand 13 feet at the shoulder and are up to 26 feet in length, 1.5 times the size of the largest African elephants today. Their size is matched only by their appetite. In better times, they wandered far and wide in an endless search of food. Now everything they normally eat is tainted with Toba ash.
You're ingesting huge quantities of this nasty stuff. It's going to affect your intestinal flora. It's going to really make you sick. Probably kill an awful lot of these creatures just from directly ingesting this stuff because they can't get vegetable material without it.
Even a few days without food is enough to fell these giant beasts. And as they struggle, opportunistic carnivores are more than willing to take advantage. Chief among them is Panthera leospalea, the cave lion. Cave lions got their name because most of their remains are found in caves. One reason for this could be the pack rats that were alive at the time.
Pack rats will go out and pick up anything shiny, including bones, and they will drag things as large as they can possibly carry back into their caves. So we actually end up with huge faunal accumulations based on pack rats going out, finding bones, bringing them back.
So whether or not these lions actually lived in caves is subject for debate. What is known for sure is that they were the top predator from Europe to Egypt and everywhere in between. They might look a lot like today's African lion, but they're easily a head taller and 2 feet longer. As formidable as they are, they could never take down an adult stegodon until now.
their prey seems to be slightly weaker. And after several weeks of not getting a good meal, these stegodons are not going to be acting in the normal sense. They're probably not going to have much energy. They're getting skinnier, but there's still plenty of meat. So this is field day for a while.
For the cave lions, it is a time of plenty, but the good times won't last long. The monsoon weather pattern will deposit more toba ash here in India than anywhere else in the world. In just a matter of days, the habitat of these cave lions will be covered in a thick blanket of the sickly volcanic residue. Some parts of India are buried up to 10 feet deep. It's 2 weeks into the disaster. Seasonal rainstorms now add to the misery of Southeast Asia. The water cycle is turning acidic from the presence of so many toxic chemicals in the air.
Sulfur dioxide or hydrogen sulfide, those are the two gases that will be produced by a volcanic eruption. When they get into the atmosphere, they start to react with water vapor and they become small acid droplets.
The caustic rain poisons groundwater. Freshwater streams become undrinkable. The few remaining stegodons are already weary from hunger. Now the few that are left will soon die of thirst. The surviving cave lions aren't faring any better. The dehydrated predators seek refuge on higher ground. But there will be no shelter from this storm. Almost every animal alive in the region is doomed to die. It is almost certain that isolated communities of humans in Southeast Asia were completely wiped out.
I absolutely believe there must have been local populations of humans that did die out, that some genetic makeup of our species that perhaps would have enriched us or changed us or made us different in some way do go extinct.
After weeks of lava and ash, Toba's caldera finally falls silent. But any comfort this is to the animals of Earth is quickly crushed. Toba has set in motion a catastrophic chain reaction. What began in fire will end in ice. Toba supervolcano has fallen silent. But the pollutants released in the eruption usher in a nightmarish new phase of the disaster. Global climate change. For the past 1.8 million years, the planet has seesawed between ice ages and times of relative warmth, called interglacial periods. When Toba erupted, Earth was interglacial. Some scientists theorize the supervolcano triggered the next ice age.
That's one of the big things about these volcanic eruptions is they produce feedbacks. That is, they start cooling, and then if it's enough, then other parts of our climate system react to it, respond, and maybe enhance the cooling.
The key to the volcano's climate-changing force is the sulfur content in the gas it releases.
One of the most significant gases that can influence climate is sulfur dioxide. Sulfurous gases, if they can get into the stratosphere, can reside there for long periods of time. And when I say long periods of time, I mean several years.
When sulfur dioxide reaches the stratosphere, it transforms into sulfate particles that radiate the sun's energy back into space. Cut off from life-giving sunlight, the Earth below begins a massive cool-down, a boomerang effect with epic consequences. When Mount Tambora erupted in 1815, it spawned the year without summer. Crop failures and famines ensued. Scientists theorize that Toba, an eruption 50 times larger than Tambora, may have had a similar effect all over the world.
The eruption caused a global winter for several years, which would have resulted in much fewer plants, fewer wildlife for people to hunt, and it would have essentially caused starvation.
5 years pass. The sun can't break through the smoggy cloud layer to warm the Earth. Temperatures plummet 10 to 30 degrees. Though it might not sound so drastic to us, the temperature drop devastates our ancient ancestors. They've never had to deal with temperatures below 50 degrees.
74,000 years ago, there were not very many of us on this planet, and that's the big problem. 74,000 years ago, we get this huge disaster of this volcanic extravaganza at a time when human populations are so small that there could have been the total extinction of humanity quite easily.
The human population dwindles. Hundreds of thousands die. It is the darkest chapter in the history of the human race. Based on study of our own DNA, scientists theorize the human population may have bottlenecked to as few as 20,000 individuals.
What you can do is look at the diversity of DNA sequences that are present in modern humans. Calculate how much variation there has been back through time. And you can see that humans actually have relatively low variation relative to a lot of species. And the reason for this is because it was very recently that we actually had this bottleneck.
The mass variability of the human genome constricted right down. This is why it's called a bottleneck. A bottle is a big open thing, and then you got that tiny little neck. You have to get through that if you're pouring out. Well, there isn't much to get through after this particular event.
Temperatures continue to drop. Icy conditions become the norm. The human race teeters on the edge of extinction. Ten years after the Toba eruption, the ash and pollutants finally wash out of the atmosphere. Earth tries to recover from the disaster, but the path is arduous. Pushed over the edge by the volcanic winter, snow and ice begin collecting over the poles. Over the course of thousands of years, massive glaciers form and slowly creep towards the equator. For a planet already stunned by the supervolcano's wrath, this ice age may be the nail in the coffin. Seeing that death, a necessary end, will come when it will come. William Shakespeare, 1600. 5,000 years after Toba's sneak attack, our planet is still reeling in the aftermath. Glaciers cover most of the world. In North America, The edge of the Wisconsin ice sheet covers most of modern-day Chicago. Beneath this creeping slab, the Great Lakes are forming, gouged from the bedrock itself. The Ice Age has given rise to new species, including a sister species of the stegodon, the woolly mammoth. It is insulated from the cold by a dense, greasy coat and a thick layer of blubber. The mammoth has large tusks to dig through the ice and snow to reach the sparse tundra grasses beneath. For a creature that requires up to 1,000 pounds of food a day to survive, the search for nourishment never ends.
When you're as big as these animals are, and when you're eating basically salad, you've got to eat almost constantly when you're up and active.
Competition for food and females is fierce. Only the strongest males will pass their genes to the next generation.
Even modern African elephants have some pretty serious battles among bull elephants, so we have to assume that mammoths were at least as aggressive as modern bull African elephants.
The mammoths are bred to be survivors, steeled against the bitter cold, starvation, and their own internal competition. The greatest threat to their existence will come from mankind. It's 10,000 years ago, over 60,000 years since Toba erupted. The supervolcano nearly drove our species to extinction, but intelligence and innovation have brought them back from the brink. As the Ice Age ends and the world thaws, man becomes the world's top predator. And for thousands of years, mammoths have been their chief food source. Some scientists theorize that human hunting drove the mammoths to extinction.
You only have to take out about 2% of the babies of an elephant population per year, more than nature otherwise would, to cause an extinction in about 500 years. It would have only taken some humans taking out a few more mastodons, mammoths than would have otherwise been taken to cause their extinction.
In the epic fight for survival, it is man's innovative nature and ever-advancing technology that gives them the edge. One new weapon, the atlatl, is a simple stick with a cup carved at one end. By inserting a spear into the cup, the thrower can then use leverage to improve his range. The atlatl now gives human hunters the ability to attack from further away. They could throw their previous spears about 200 feet. This modification more than doubled that range. The tougher life became for ancient humans, the more they pioneered new ways to survive. Their intelligence and tools ensure the survival of our species.
One of the most fascinating of all questions is whether this particular event actually improved us. Improved in the sense that making us more as we are now. Evolution seems to be about life. It's really about death. Death makes evolution work. And evolution is looking back. It is the series of genes you got from the survivability of the group before you, adapted at that time before you.
Alas, in the wake of Toba, many other species of large mammals, Gigantopithecus, Panthera leo, Elasmotherium, disappear forever. But on the grand scale of mass extinction, Toba is just a blip. The tropical rains turn the volcano's massive caldera into a lake that still exists today, leaving scarcely any sign of the terrible catastrophe that changed the world. But it's not over. Underneath the crust, magma still rages. Supervolcanic events like Toba can happen at any time, leaving our species at risk. In fact, scientists believe we may be less prepared than even our ancient ancestors to deal with the crisis.
75,000 years ago, these early hominids had to be jack of all trades in order to survive in that kind of a habitat. Today, we've all become specialized. We're not jack of all trades, or at least most of us aren't, and therefore, in many ways, culturally, we're less well equipped than early humans even to face a severe environmental catastrophe like this.
Mankind is but a small player in the drama of Earth's mass extinctions. No matter where the next supervolcano strikes, its devastation is sure to be felt around the world. Are we resourceful enough to survive as our ancestors did? There is no doubt we will be tested again.